And the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for see, I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people." I'm afraid I'm going to have to take you back to when I was a teenager. Apologize. I took my first class in philosophy when I was in the 12th grade. And the reason, I think, looking back, for taking that class was really the result of an accident. I had, at the age of 12 or 13, had a bizarre freak event that left me injured and partially paralyzed for several weeks. And my life was disrupted, maybe forever. All our lives, really, are full of accidents, aren't they? Circumstances we cannot choose, prevent, or control. And I want to go back to that idea of how our lives are full of accidents and circumstances that are just completely beyond us, and how our lives are, in fact, responses to these happenstances. I think it has to do with the birth of Jesus of Nazareth in Bethlehem. But let me go back to this philosophy class. That injury of having laid me up for several weeks had an effect on me. I became fascinated and kind of obsessed with the big questions of life. I was wondering about what is the nature of existence? What is my relationship to the faith of my childhood? Who is this God that the church of my upbringing worshipped and talked about, and where I had served as an acolyte? Was God, in fact, really God? Was God really good? Or was God indifferent, detached, uncaring, or maybe just fickle and arbitrary, moody, like some people in my life, like me? If God intervened in human affairs, does prayer influence those interventions? Why did bad things happen to good people? Or, more curiously, why did good things happen to bad people? And was I good or bad? Naughty or nice? And how would you know? Those questions somehow led me to an early morning winter class. Like his body checks on the hockey rink or his tackles and sacks on the football field, Tommy was, I should say, direct. You didn't want to argue with Tommy Cates. So it's early morning, early January, it's Philosophy 101. We teenagers are not fully alert at 7:30 in the morning in a January. I think classes for teenagers at 7:30 is now outlawed. That should be. Mr. Davidson was our gentle and mild-mannered teacher, trying to introduce us to the different branches of philosophy. Ethics is the study of how to live a good life. What is good, what is evil, how you live. A big word for us, epistemology, explores the nature of knowing. How do you know things? What is truth? How do you apprehend reality? Philosophical anthropology involves answering the question, what does it mean to be a human being? I like these questions, and I found a home in that class mainly because I had already dropped out of calculus. I couldn't do that. But I could grapple with these questions. And then that morning came this. Cosmology investigates the end of the universe. Tommy lifts up his head from what looked like his drowsiness. Excuse me? Can you repeat that, Mr. D? Why, yes, Tommy. Cosmology is the branch of philosophy that explores what is at the end of the universe. Tommy sat bolt upright. Now hold on, Mr. D. Well, what the heck they think is at the end of the universe? Like, do they think it's like cardboard or something? Suddenly we're all pondering, like, you go out to the very end of the universe by some mystical spaceship and you just crash into a boundary of corrugated cardboard. Maybe this was it. This was the end of my existential searching. Tommy's direct statement has never left me. Sometimes there are days, I wonder if it's true for you, when you think, what is at the end of the universe? Maybe it's better for you than just cardboard, as he called it. Maybe there's something better, or something infinitely beyond our reach and imagination. Some days it just seems as meaningless and cold and bland as cardboard. So what does the episode on that January morning have to do with Christmas Eve? What does it have to do with Joseph compliantly traveling through a perilous and costly journey to obey the order of a faraway and fickle emperor so that he could be taxed? What would motivate someone to obey such an order? How did he see the structure and the architecture of the universe that led him to that kind of obedience or compliance? What does the question of what is at the end of the universe have to do with these nameless shepherds overwhelmed with a heavenly display of angels who tell them of a most surprising promise? Or Mary, whose moment has come to give birth at a most inconvenient time? All these characters in this passage from Luke's gospel just seem so at the mercy of circumstances beyond their control, over which they have no influence except to just let it be. Let the creation, let the universe do what the universe will do, and hope that it's for good, and hope and plead that it's for some purpose which is healthful and life-giving and decent. As I said, there are days, are there not, when we wonder, what does all of this mean? Not so much what is at the end of the universe, but what is the end of the universe, the purpose, the meaning, the reason of this all. Joseph surely must have wondered, what would happen if I just didn't go to Bethlehem? What if I just stayed here in this cave home that is warm and safe in Nazareth? What if I just don't obey? How will the universe reward or punish me for that? We don't know what went through his mind. Or even if he thought about it, maybe he was just so broken in will that he just went without question. Because, well, what would a poor, disenfranchised man, a man with no vote, no agency, no influence of any kind of political power or standing, could do otherwise? So we read this passage and we hear it every year, and we ask ourselves again, I think, what is the meaning behind everyone going along and agreeing to these forces that are well beyond them? Are they just obeying a kind of cardboard God who could care less about any of them? Or is there something infinitely more exciting, more astonishing, more engaging, more life-igniting and restoring at work in all of these events? Or for that matter, in the various circumstances and events in your life that each of you represent and bring to this space? What is God up to with us? Another word I learned in that early morning class on another morning was a word I promise you will not see on any Hallmark Christmas card, unless you might get it in a Christmas card if you're unlucky enough to get one that I crafted and sent to you. It's the word contingency. I send Christmas cards with the words contingency in it. So pray that you don't get one like that. Contingency is the condition of being dependent upon forces beyond your control or influence. Uncertainty, the unpredictability of existence, that's what we talk about with contingency. And we know it all too well. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, the phone rings. Or you answer a text because you heard your cell phone and it's a message from a parent or a child. And the message either brings absolute delight and makes your heart sing, or it utterly makes your heart sink and the floor drops from under you. You hear a message from a doctor and you hear one word, and suddenly all the other words that come out of the doctor's mouth you cannot hear because you're shocked and you're stuck and you have no idea what's coming next. You're driving along a country road and an animal shoots out and suddenly you swerve and you're somewhere you never thought you'd be. Or you're at a coffee shop and you hear somebody say something in the table next to you and it causes you to just react in ways that you never thought you could react. And suddenly, you're at the mercy of contingency. Events, forces beyond you. God, being God, is free to stay away from all of this immune and detached and protected from all of these circumstances. Instead, what we celebrate and are in awe of tonight is that God has chosen to enter into a world of complete and utter uncertainty. God has chosen to enter our lives where we are, to come close, to take on not some inorganic, inert material, but our human flesh, our heartbeat, our breath, our feelings are no longer separate from God. This becomes our new cosmology. This is the new architecture of the whole universe. This is God taking on all that we have to offer, all of our brutality and callousness and insecurity, and all of our delight and mercy and love. God takes on a human being and becomes completely and utterly dependent upon our capacity to see a child of God in another human being. Completely dependent upon our capacity to look at our neighbor in these pews or out there on the streets of Concord or in the streets of Aleppo or in the streets of Gaza or in the streets of Kyiv, to see a child of God. God chooses that. That is what God chooses tonight. We'll come back here, many of us, a few months from now, on Good Friday, and we will see just how far God chooses to take on contingency. Just how far, the extent God will love us. To enter our life with all that delights us and all that sparks terror in our heart. All that brings you joy, all that breaks your heart. This is the world, our world, that God has chosen to enter in the person of Jesus Christ. And by the mystery of this life, death and resurrection, his sharing of himself at this font and at this altar, he makes a home with us. With us. It occurred to me, and I mentioned this earlier, I kind of am disappointed that we have homemade bread that actually tastes like bread for the Holy Eucharist, instead of those little wafers that we always used to get in other places that taste exactly like cardboard. Because that cardboard connects me to that imaginative leap that my friend, now deceased, Tommy Cates made. This is the end of the universe. Come close. The creator of all, the sustainer of all, the lover of all, the judge of all, the forgiver of all, the healer of all, has come that close for us to take it in, to become us, so that we become the Christ child. This Christ child becomes the end of the universe, the purpose, the end, the reason, the logic, the design of our lives. Because in this child is every child, in every place, every human being, indeed even, as Dostoevsky once said, in every leaf and every creature, calling us to love, to forgive, to plead for forgiveness, to become one with all in a peace that passes all comprehension, that even is present in those moments of our worst contingencies. I pray that every event that meets you in the coming year brings you nothing but delight and joy. And when, not if, but when they don't, may you hear the sound and the voice and the words of those angels that say to us, do not be afraid. You are never, ever alone. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Amen.